An artist that I follow, named Jackie Druzzo, I think that's how you pronounce it, this person, she made a video a while ago, like 2 years ago, where she took frames from a movie, or a few movies, and painted them to learn better lighting and composition. And I thought, I want to do that. I recently watched the movie Obsession, which is so good, you should go watch it. And in it, there's a few shots that I really wanted to paint. And so today, we are going to do that. I would like to improve my digital painting skills, my composition skills, my color picking skills, my value picking skills. If there's a skill involved in digital painting, I'd probably want to improve it. So today, I'm going to be taking a bunch of frames from movies, TV, wherever, and painting them. The first thing I'm going to paint is this screenshot from Breaking Bad. I've been rewatching it, and something about this shot just really made me want to paint it. But actually, before I start painting, let me tell you what about this shot makes it so interesting. This screenshot utilizes the rule of thirds very well. That is, you take it and divide it into 3 sections, vertically and horizontally. You can see that Jesse and Walter take up the bottom third, while the leg sort of takes up the right third. This creates a path for your eye to follow through the image, from the top of the leg down to where Jesse and Walter are, where you're supposed to be looking. Additionally, the verticality of the trees and the leg, and even the gun, is sort of pointed at Jesse and Walter, showing you exactly where you, the viewer, should be looking in this moment. If your eyes ever get lost in this big empty space, that's okay. They can be pulled straight back down. But let's start painting. I start with the sky, almost like I'm doing a traditional painting, starting furthest back as I can, and immediately my colors are too saturated, too bright, and I had to start over. Luckily, this was at the very beginning of the process, so it didn't mess me up. The sky takes up a lot of space in this composition, but starting with the sky also gives me a good starting place, so I'm not starting from a blank pure white page. Starting from pure white can be really daunting, and it can also mess up your values, since anything you put on top of pure white is going to look darker than it might actually be. Then I lay in the ground and I start to paint in the clouds. I think clouds are really easy and really fun to paint. All you have to do really is look at them and act as if they're solid objects and you're painting some sort of abstract form, which you are. But if you try to get their transparency correctly, or try to paint them like they're soft and fluffy, they're gonna end up kind of a big mess. If you just separate out the shadows from the highlights, they can be really fun to paint. Also, a tip for when your background is just a sky and flat ground, if you just add a little texture into your ground, making the ground closer to you darker and further away from you lighter, you're going to be able to achieve a little bit more depth than if it was just completely flat. A very general rule of thumb that does not apply everywhere, but it's something you can keep in mind, is that things that are closer to you are going to be darker, where things far away from you are going to be lighter. Then I paint in this leg. And doing so, I establish that this is my darkest value. The shadows in this leg are the darkest values in this painting, and I will not be using anything darker. Then I painted in the house, and it was feeling a little bit stale. Something wasn't quite right. So I look back at my reference image, and I notice that I forgot to include bounce light. Basically, light is going to bounce from the sun, hit the ground, and bounce back up at the roof of this house. Then it's going to bounce back onto the wall. That creates this sort of red brick color in the wall that you're seeing in the roof. It's important to think about when painting how colors are going to reflect off of some surfaces onto others, especially when they're bouncing into shadows, because then you're going to get a saturated color inside of that shadow that you may not think about putting there. And after including that bounce light, it automatically feels very cohesive. Then I start painting in all the trees and plants. The way I paint in trees is very simple. I start with a shape for the trunk, and then a big shape for the leaves, and a shape for the shadow for the leaves, and then I use my eraser, and I erase away the negative space of the tree. It's way easier to remove where there aren't leaves than it is to paint every single leaf, and it creates this very cool effect that is very effective, in my opinion. Then I add in all the tires and rocks that you see scattered around, and now it's time to paint the part that I've been putting off the entire time. The figures, Jesse and Walter on the ground here. And now, since these figures have more complex shapes than anything else in this painting, I decide to turn off my brain and solely use my eyes going into shape recognition mode. Basically, Sometimes your brain can act like a filter and paint what it thinks something is supposed to look like instead of what it actually looks like. So if you just turn off your brain and you see a shape here, you put that shape on your page. It's as easy as that. Eventually, if you get all the shapes correctly, you should have something that resembles a human figure or whatever you're trying to paint. When it comes to the face, all you really need is two planes, the front and the side. In this case, a dark plane and a light plane. If you can separate them like this, you have a very quick shorthand for human head, instead of just using like a ball or a cube. Just look at the shapes of your shadows and look at the shapes of your highlights, and you have a head. And that's all you really need. You might also need to like and subscribe. In the end, I adjust some of my values, make sure they're right, and I'm left with this image. Now, I'm pretty happy with this. Obviously, it's not a finished painting, but it's not supposed to be. It's a study to help learn composition, lighting, and all these things. I think it's very effective. I think I achieved a good amount of depth with a very clear foreground, midground, and background. The colors might not be completely accurate, but I think they work well for the painting. Okay, I lied. I'm not just painting for movies and TV. Charli XCX just released rock music and the accompanying music video. I love this song. I love the music video. And the first shot of the music video is this. I think this is a great composition, and it's in black and white, which means I don't have to think about color. I can strictly focus on value. If we apply the rule of thirds to this frame, you can see that Charli activates the middle third. Then if you take just the center and upper parts of that third, you can see she's in there, and then her head is in the top one. This is a very effective way to divide up a scene. It guides your eye right to Charli, preparing you for when she throws this TV out the window. I start by blocking in my basic shapes, which is really just three. It's 3 rectangles, a light one, a dark one, and then a light one again. That really is the entire composition of this shot. But sometimes simplicity is the most effective. Unfortunately, though, the 2 light rectangles are made of bricks. Now, I have 2 ways of painting bricks. The first one is that I don't, and I find a picture of bricks and I photo bash it into my painting because I don't have time to render all those bricks. Or I just paint in a few lines to indicate that these are bricks, and I leave the rest to your imagination. That is what I'll be doing here. Then I paint in the TV using the same darkest value that I already established in the middle rectangle. I'm not going to use a value darker than that anywhere else in this piece. And now it's time to paint Charli. This is a very interesting and unusual angle, so once again, I'm going to activate shape recognition mode, and I'm not going to think about how it should look. I'm just going to paint how it does look. And once again, I separate the face into 2 distinct planes, light and dark, and that's all I need. You can actually do this for the entire figure, separated into light and dark. If you manage to copy the shapes good enough, then you should have what looks like a figure. In the end, this is what I ended up with. I'd call it successful. I think the figure shapes are not completely accurate. I think she's a little bit too big, a little bit too close to the top of the page, but I think the values work very well. And that's what's important about a black and white piece. I should be saying grayscale and not black and white, but you get what I mean. This last image is from the movie Obsession. Love the movie. Obsessed. Sickening movie. If you like gore and gross things and scary movies, it's great. You should watch it. The scene that I'm painting is not going to be very scary. It's just this. I think it's very simple. I think it's very effective, but I think it's going to be a challenge because there's not a lot of values happening. The entire thing is very dark except for the very light rectangle in the middle, which is the subject, the focal point you should be looking at. It's also a very desaturated image because it's so dark at nighttime. There's not a lot of colors happening, but that's not to say there's no colors happening. If you apply the rule of thirds here, you can see that the car takes up the lower third, and then the figure is right in the middle, right for your eyes to look directly at. I saw this shot and knew I was probably going to be painting it. And the dark silhouette against the only light thing in the scene, great. I wasn't sure where to start, but when I don't know where to start, I start with the sky. There's only a little bit of sky in this one, but it's pretty much black, so I established my darkest value right from the beginning. I'm not going to paint anything darker than this sky right here. Then I block in just a shape for the house, trying to get it as accurate as possible, but it doesn't really matter. Then I take my shadow color again, the darkest color, and I kind of carve out my shadows, forming this house. Some slightly lighter values, some slightly more saturated values, until I have what I like as the house. I did not want to paint this car. I'm really bad at drawing cars. So once again, shape recognition mode. I think drawing cars is harder than drawing people. But I think it turned out okay. Separated it into 2 values once again. You can do it with faces, you can do it with people, you can do it with cars. Anything that can be separated into light and dark, you can just use your shape recognition skills to paint it. This, top of the car light, side of the car dark. Simple as that. Then I paint in the silhouette, and I realized that I forgot to paint in the tree. So I add in a trunk, and I add in some very light highlights as indications of leaves and trees in the background. And in the end, this is my final product. I think this might be the weakest of the 3, but I still like the way it came out. Very solid foreground with the car, background with the figure. I do think, though, I could have saturated my colors a little more. I was too scared to commit to fully saturated colors anywhere, since it is a nighttime scene. These are my film/TV/music video studies. I highly recommend doing this exercise. It's fun, and it's a really good way to learn composition, since these directors have already put in all the hard work in making a good composition. You can just copy them. It's also good color and value practice. There's not really a downside to doing this exercise, especially if you can't draw from life. Drawing from a movie is probably the next best thing. Then you can take what you learned and add it to your own visual library to use later in your own paintings. And it's fun. Thanks for watching.